Hey booktube! If you're new here, my name is the Book Mage, and if you're not, welcome back to my channel. Additionally, if you're new here and you haven't seen one of my book reviews before, be aware that I don't always hold back my opinion. And if you don't like salt or complaining, then this video might not be the one for you. Equally, if you read this book and you love this book, then again, you do you, this video might not be for you, and that's fine. However, if you are here to hear my opinion and the saltiness that it is, I will be talking about this book and specifically all the reasons that I did not like it. So this is not like a full rundown, like recap review, anything like that. This is just the issues that I had with this book. And the reason that I'm making this video is because in my wrap-up, I sort of accidentally talked about this book for like 10-15 minutes, and I realised if I'm talking about just one book this long, it kind of needs to be its own video, so that my wrap-up isn't a million hours long based on just one book. Equally, before we start, I will say I didn't hate this book. I think overall it maybe got like a 2 stars out of me. I thought it had a lot of issues, which I will go into, but it wasn't disgustingly, horrendously bad like some other books I have read. It takes a little bit more to make it a 1 star for me, so I thought this was like, okay, but I did still dislike a lot about it. So fair warning, this video will have full spoilers. I will be talking mainly as if you've read the book, but I will be explaining in like enough detail in case you haven't read the book and you don't want to because you just want to hear the salt. So I will try to contextualize everything as much as I can, and hopefully some of you might be saved from having to read this book that just did not know what it was trying to be. Also, I realised I kind of like some sort of weird Puritan grandma. I promise that's not the vibe I'm going for. So I did make some notes because otherwise I'll ramble forever. And I did go back through this book actually this morning, just for you guys, and I tabbed this whole book. And I don't know if you can like really see the tab situation there, but every single one of these was a particular case of something that I did not like in the book. So every single one of these tabs is a complaint from me. Anyway, what I'm going to do is, just in case you've not read this book, I am going to give you like a really quick like whistle-stop tour of like all the major like plot points here. So the main character's name is Alessandra, and she's the second daughter of like some minor noble. So Alessandra goes to the palace to try and like woo the king because she wants to marry him, kill him, and then become the queen and like take his kingdom. She gets his attention at the ball, they kind of sort of start courting, and then he proposes that they like fake date to get like these advisors off his back who want him to like marry and settle down and like produce an heir. So they date, and then there's like a couple other just pointless like random side plots going on in the background, such as one of Alessandra's like old boyfriends basically comes back and like tries to use her, and there's somebody looking into the death of like her first lover who she killed because he dumped her. Basically a bunch of pointless side plot, nothing happens to like pad the book out, and this book is only barely 300 pages, so like it's almost all padding. And anyway, it turns out that the king doesn't even really care that she killed someone because she's the main character and can get away with anything, like even literal murder. The only real kind of like side plot that has any sort of bearing is that the king's parents were assassinated several years ago and he is still trying to track down that assassin, and in the meantime like people are also trying to assassinate him. And if you guessed it was like the very obvious like head of the advisors who would gain power if there was like no monarch, then you were correct. Kind of convoluted. Turns out that his older brother, who you thought was dead, isn't actually dead, and is this guy in disguise who's been like his best friend for the past several years, and his disguise is that he's dyed his hair and changed his name. And was totally not recognisable as the main character's brother. Like the previous heir to the throne, sure. Anyway, the whole time, the king and Alessandra have been like falling in love, and everything turns out okay, and they end up together at the end, and that's the end. It's very basic, it's fine, like it sounds kind of fine on paper, you know, something doesn't have to be mind-blowing to just be like an entertaining, bingeable read. And this maybe could have been that. Like when I first finished it, I just kind of thought that it was okay, kind of like middling, nothing impressive, but I thought, you know, somebody out there will probably like this, and I think they still will. However, the more I thought about it, and the more I like thought about the villains and why we're not supposed to like these antagonists, and then like the main character and the way that this whole plot is presented, it's just, it is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it contradicts itself so many times. This book is so hypocritical, it's so weird, and I'm gonna get into it in a sec. But this is like nothing to do with the plot, one tiny detail about this book is, people send letters back and forth all the time, and every single character has their own font for their letters, and they're all ridiculous, they're all handwriting fonts, and so if you struggle to read books with weird fonts, give up. Give up. This is one page with letters on it. This font is literally tiny. Anyway, that was just like a tiny personal gripe that's not related to the plot. I'm gonna prop those behind me so that I don't have to hold this book up for the whole review. Basically, the place I'm gonna start is to say that this main character is one of the most annoying main characters. She's awful. All the men are attracted to her, everybody likes her, everyone loves her, they all want to be like her and look like her and dress like her and act like her. The whole kingdom is like copying like her outfits and like her behaviour because she's just so perfect and everybody wants to be her. The dresses in this book, it's unbelievable. Every other chapter, there is just like half a page of outfit description. I used pink tabs to show every single time there was like an outfit. Look at all these pink tabs. This is just outfit description just for the main character, and I didn't count if it mentioned like, oh, you know, she tore a glove or something like that. I didn't count that. This was, today I'm wearing this and it's this colour and it looks like this and it does this and it does, and I counted and it does it 14 times. This book is barely 300 pages long. That's like 1 to 2 paragraphs of like detailed outfit description every 23 pages. I joked about it in my reading vlog. I said that this book kind of read a bit like My Immortal when I read that first outfit description, and I was joking, but honestly, looking back on it, it's exactly like My Immortal, just with like slightly better editing. I feel like every scene in this book is just an excuse to have the main character wear something else and like just describe a cool outfit. It was so ridiculous by the end of it. There are so many in here, and they're all Awful. Oh, and she designs them all, by the way, because she's so smart and she's so talented, and like obviously she's revolutionizing like the fashion game of this entire kingdom. Because even like the seamstresses and like fashion designers, they're not doing that, but she is. There's so many in here. Look at this. Overall, the dress is a light yellow. Every few inches, the fabric folds over, and our heavy soft dress next to shoes start. I went past my hair and my nails. I joined the strap. I suspect that black women at all will be able to keep their eyes off of me. If you want to know how long that took, I've now been filming for 25 minutes. But yes, aside from getting basically like every single description of the main character every time she wears something new, she's also like the only person that the king has ever really like entertained or pursued. She's smart and she's witty and she's beautiful and she has the answer to everyone's questions. And she can outsmart basically everyone in any situation and is like never at a disadvantage. Like she'll always have the last word or make like the perfect snarky comment, and she always gets her own way, and everyone else will just like get shown up or like get made a fool of for like the tiniest slight of just not being aligned with her in the slightest. This is going to bring me to a sort of annoying issue. This book, and it does this a lot constantly throughout the whole book, and it's very heavy-handed. This book does nothing but soapbox about feminism. Like every chance it gets, oh, the main character has to have a thought that's like, I'm not promiscuous, I am a sexually empowered woman, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there is nothing wrong with that, but you don't have to say it every single time like the topic comes up. The main character like talks and thinks a lot about like empowering women and like women having like agency and choices and decisions, because in this world, kind of like the way it works, it's not really established, but there is a law that like the younger sisters cannot like court or get married until the older sisters are already married. And it seems that a lot of people are like bringing their daughters to like court the king and like see if he wants to take their hand, sort of thing. And it seems that a lot of marriages are arranged by like a parent or like a father. So it stands to reason in this world that kind of the way it is that girls are, while they do have like some freedoms because they seem to be able to like in some circumstances choose who they court, for the most part like most of the characters seem to be, it seems to be that like daughters are paired off by their parents. Like it'll be an agreement between parents that like their children will get married for like, I don't know, status or a family alliance or literally anything like that. That's like the scenario we're in. And the main character, like she thinks a lot about how she would like to change things so that women could be able to like have sex without having to be married first and like not be condemned for that. And I think it's like quite early towards like the start of the book, but she's picturing like herself ruling and being able to like make these decisions and like make it a better place, at least in her mind, which is like, yeah, great, good. Like I can get behind a character that wants to like have women on like equal footing with the men and like end this whole like arranged marriage situation. That sounds fine to me. But in the context of the book, it's like so overt all the time. It almost doesn't really, and I know it's meant to be like a fantasy, sort of, kind of, but like it doesn't really make sense that she's the only woman who thinks like this. And the thing is, she'll walk into like a room full of women and like they'll come to her with a problem and she'll just be like, you know, she'll have like this very feminist outlook, and the other women will be like, oh, can I do that? And she'll be like, you can do that, you're a person. And it's like she's slowly like teaching all these other women that they can like take the initiative and like have their own opinion and have their own say in their own lives. And it's very like saviory and weird, and it's like it's weird to me that she's the only person that sort of has this opinion. The king also feels the same way though. Nobody else does, and it's just this weird thing of people seem to agree with her, obviously, because why wouldn't the women? Like, it would be better for them if they did agree with her about like having their own agency. But it's just weird to me that it never really occurs to any of the other characters. You know, she's like the only feminist, and she's swanning in here teaching all these like, oh, these poor unfortunate women like, hey, did you know you're people too? And it's just, it's a bit on the nose and it's a bit heavy-handed, and I don't know why she has to be like so much more perfect and like why she's better than everybody else. It would make more sense to me if she found friendships within the kingdom when she goes for the first time, if she found like-minded women, if it wasn't just like, oh, I liked you because of your dress or whatever like this. It would be nicer if like the two girls she meets, I can't remember their names, but she makes these two female friends, and I think it would be nicer if their friendship were based on something a little more than her like coming to the rescue and being like, oh, did you not realize you could just do this the whole time? It would be nicer if she found like common ground with them and that was the basis for a friendship. Seems a bit more realistic, but the author doesn't do that. The author just has her step in like a school teacher every time there's an issue. It's just kind of weird. I'm like, is it really that feminist if you just have like one main character who's like just better than everyone else and more conscious than everyone else and just like more woke than everyone else, just coming in and just like handing out wokeness like, yay, feminism? It's like, okay, I get it, but it doesn't really make sense in like the context of this world. It's like, where would she have got this from? And if it's possible for her to think like this, why is nobody else thinking like this? But here's the thing, this is bringing me onto like, this was kind of like the first thing that kind of sat a bit like iffy with me, and the more I thought about it, it's not the biggest issue in the book by far, but it's one that I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it sort of led me on to realising that there are so many other issues in the book, and it's sort of where the hypocrisy starts. So like, despite the main character being a feminist and like believing that women can live like however they want, she's fine for them to be like sexually promiscuous, that's totally fine with her, and also she's fine with them to like remain like to be quite chaste, like however you want to think with it. One of the girls wants to wait until she's married before she's like intimate with the guy that she's dating, and like the main character also supports that in a very on-the-nose statement of like, yes, I will support her whatever she chooses to do with like, you know, her sexual inhibitions or whatever. It's like, as you should. Literally the bar has never been so low. And yet, There is one character in this book who just sort of accidentally, through her inclusion, proves that this whole thing is just completely for show. It's just completely just to get like woke points for this book. And neither like this book, the character, the plot, or any of the messages in it are even remotely actually feminist. And that all of the times that it seems to mention like all these feminist things, it just seems like parroting the most basic, like obvious in your face kind of stuff. And none of it is really reflected in like the character or her actions or like even just the way that the story plays out. All of it is completely just like undone and overridden, in my opinion, by what I'm about to talk about next. Okay, so there's a character in this book and her name is Melita. So Melita is engaged to one of Alessandra, the main character's friends, called, his name is Ruben. This, like most marriages seem to be in this universe, it's been arranged. So Melita and Ruben's parents have come together and decided that their kids are going to get married. And it's most beneficial for Melita because Ruben is of higher status, so she will like move up when they get married. And the thing is, I can literally only discern two reasons why we're not supposed to like Melita. One reason is because she's engaged to Ruben, and Ruben does not want to be engaged to her. So we're meant to dislike her because it's perceived that like she's the problem, because she's happy to go through with the engagement. Even though she doesn't actually like love Ruben or anything like that, she's happy to go through with their arrangement, which was arranged for them. The other reason is because she's like the only person in this book who doesn't immediately love the main character. I genuinely think one of the only reasons we're meant to dislike her is because she doesn't like the main character. And bearing in mind, she doesn't do anything, and she doesn't say anything. She never like does anything like mean or says anything mean, really. She glares at the main character a few times because he doesn't like her. And it's also really obvious that the main character does not like Melita, because we're viewing this book like it's told in first person, it's from her perspective. It's just very obvious that the only reason the main character doesn't like her is because Melita also does not like Alessandra. So yay, congratulations, you've managed to put pointless girl on girl hate for literally no established reason into this book. This book that was supposedly supposed to have like a feminist message. Why would we do this? Why would we didn't need this? This did not need to be here. It's like they're in the same position. Like the main character is a girl who is trying to arrange herself a marriage with the king so that she can increase her station and then kill him. And Melita is a girl who is in an arranged like marriage. She's in like an arranged engagement at this point with someone that like maybe doesn't want to marry her, you know, but at least she's not going to kill him at the end of it. But no, Melita's the bad one we're not supposed to like. It just, basically, this girl, Melita, is someone who has been born into a world where this is like the common thing, that girls are betrothed off by their parents or their fathers or whatever to people that they may not necessarily want to get married to, but it's to increase their station and to like make a link between the families or whatever. It's an arrangement between like her parents and Ruben's parents. And that's just the state of this world. Like that's how this society works. It's not an uncommon thing. It's not like she's doing something like heinous and unthinkable. Like this is the norm in this world. She's literally not done anything wrong. It's literally the same as the main character, just she's not going to kill someone at the end of it. So if anything, she's better than the main character. Yeah, so because Ruben doesn't want to marry her, Melita has to be the bad guy in this situation. Not her parents though, who arranged it. Not Ruben's parents, who agreed to it. No, the girl who is part of an arranged marriage is the bad guy here. Again, just because she's okay going through with it. Not the parents that are like commanding and forcing their children into a union that they may or may not want to be a part of. They're also literally never even like mentioned in any of this, like because the main character comes up with a plot to like get rid of this issue. They're never mentioned aside from Ruben's dad, who is like a pawn in this plot, and that's it. Yeah, because that's what they do. The main character comes up with a plan to get Ruben out of his arranged marriage, which you would think would be a good thing, you know? Ruben doesn't want to get married. We want to help him. This is good. So is she going to use her cunning and her influence to like get the parents to somehow call off the wedding, you know, call off their engagement? She could blackmail them somehow, threaten them, bribe them, use her new position as like the person courting the king, or the future queen in fact, to somehow try and like broker some sort of agreement, maybe find like better matches for each person that suit their station. She could do any number of things. Does she do this? No. Alessandra's plan to save Ruben from his arranged marriage to Melita is to set it up to make it look like Melita is having an affair with somebody else, and then to have Ruben's dad walk in and declare Melita as being unfaithful and a fallen woman and like ruin her reputation and call off the wedding, and then Ruben is free, leaving Melita with like nothing. How they do this is there's another character in this whole thing, and I'm going to have to look up his stupid name. Oh my god, I flipped to the exact right page where he writes love letters. Fantastic. Because we didn't just need another handwriting font in this book. His name is Orin Galopas, Earl of Eliades, and I think they just call him Eliades or Orin or something like that. So I'm gonna go with Orin. Yeah, so basically, Orin is this kind of, he's like a little bit pious, he's like all about like charity and donations and like being faithful to the gods and things like that. And he's in a better position, I think, even than Ruben. And basically, it's very obvious that Melita has kind of a crush on Orin. So what they do is they forge a love letter from Orin to Melita. They trick Orin into going to Melita's rooms. She kisses him thinking that he loves her, like as per his letter. Ruben then walks in right on time with his dad. His dad sees Melita kiss Orin, who has no idea what's going on. He then obviously says that Melita is like unfit to marry his son and has like betrayed their union or whatever, and like he leaves and Ruben leaves and Alessandra's gone, and like he basically breaks off their arrangement. And then, to add insult to injury, Melita then finds out that she was framed and that Orin never liked her. He doesn't even know her full name. he doesn't care who she is and didn't even really notice her existence, and he kind of tells her that, and then because he's really confused about what's going on, and then he leaves, and she is left with nothing, and that is how the situation ends for her. I think she is never mentioned again for the whole book. I hate this for so many reasons, the least of which being, the main character could have just like made an effort to befriend Melita and like find her a better match, or like talk her out of the engagement, because she also doesn't really want to marry Ruben. That's just like, I don't know, like he's kind of like her ticket to a slightly better life in nobility or something. Like that's the setup that's been arranged, and that's what she's willing to go with. But like, I don't think she cares necessarily who she's betrothed to at that point. She was literally just following like the natural order of being married off to achieve status. The same as the main character. They're in the same situation. I hate it so much. If anything, the main character's in a slightly more free situation because she's choosing like who to pursue and who she's courting, and Melita isn't. And you would think if she were a feminist, she might be able to see this and, I don't know, not just have like the pointless girl hate. Seriously, the whole reason we're not supposed to like Melita is because she doesn't like the main character and she's like a slight inconvenience to one of the main character's friends. They never really interact aside from a time when Alessandra tries to publicly like expose Melita's crush on Orin at like the dinner table while they're eating with like everyone that they know. She just like tries to expose it to the whole table, and I think that's the only time they exchange words. I really think that's the only time like one of them speaks to the other. And Melita's response is like she doesn't bite back or insult back. She doesn't do anything. Like she's clearly like embarrassed, and like she turns away and like ignores Alessandra, just doesn't engage with her. I don't understand why she's the bad person. Literally all she does otherwise is like she glares at the main character from across the room, which like fair enough. Does it matter? Or she just doesn't fawn over the main character like everyone else. It seems like she does so much worse than everyone else because everyone else is like just begging at this main character's feet, like the proposals, the invitations, everything. Everyone loves her. People like copying her outfits, like every time she wears something new. The whole rest of the kingdom is like trying to wear the very next thing. Like the very next day they're trying to wear the same thing that she wore the day previous. Like everyone else is just eating the main character up, apart from like this one girl, and therefore we don't like her. And the thing is, there are like characters who are way more actively like against Alessandra who never get even half the comeuppance that Melita gets. It is pointless girl on girl hate for no reason, and it overrides basically any and all of this whole pointless, stupid, feminist soapboxing that this book does, because when it comes to actually show it on the page to exemplify like real feminist things happening like within the plot, it's like it doesn't do that. It just resorts to girls hating girls for literally no reason, and that we should hate this girl for literally no reason. The only reason she's in this situation is because it's what society dictates, a society that the main character has already said on multiple occasions she wishes to change for the betterment of the women around her. So why is she not doing that? Is she just that stupid? It really does feel like all the feminist stuff was really just shoehorned in there to make the main character just look smarter and more woke and like more like cool and acceptable to like a modern audience, because she just isn't. She's actually the worst. She really is the worst, and I'm not even half done yet. I feel like if you're gonna make her an antagonist, at least actually make her one. Make her do something that's deserving of like the level of like backlash and retaliation that she actually got. Or make Alessandra understanding and demonstrate like her actual feminism here. Have her demonstrate her willingness to like help the women around her and elevate them out of this situation that's maybe kind of a crappy situation for them too. Like she could have tried to free Melita from like the burden of her engagement by convincing her that if there's someone that she prefers more, she should be free to break off the engagement and pursue her own desires like herself if there's somebody that she wants to be with more than Ruben. Like put into action the values that the main character supposedly has, and just have her help this girl even if it doesn't benefit her, because it's what she believes in. Supposedly. Like if you're a feminist, you're not just supposed to be a feminist for like the women that are your friends. It's supposed to be like an all-encompassing thing. You don't just get to pick and choose the women that get respect. You don't. If anything, as I said before, the main character is in the exact same situation. She's just aiming higher, and with the intent to kill her paramour at the end of the engagement. So, really? I just don't know how the author was trying to swing this one. Yes, main character, despite professing to care about like women and women's rights and things like that, and wanting to change the way that women are like treated and perceived in their society, perfectly happy to just crush another woman that it just happens to dare to be placed in an arranged marriage with someone that the main character just happens to be friends with. Because apparently they need to be taken down a peg or two and like have their reputation ruined. And like even in Alessandra's own mind, if she like becomes queen and changes things for women, you know, the conditions for Melita, she's already been exposed at this point, falsely, but she's been exposed as like a liar and a cheater and unfaithful, and that's what people will think of her now. Like that's her situation. She's disgraced, and even if the standards for women change, she will still be those things. Like she will still be perceived as a liar and someone who is unfaithful, even though it's not true. And the thing is, like, it is true about the main character though, and yet Melita is the one that has to live with the consequences of something that she didn't do, and yet the main character gets to like win against everyone else and cover up all of her like infidelity, because even though it turns out that the Shadow King doesn't care that she's like slept around, like he literally doesn't care, like that's fine, great for him. Society kind of does, and she's still trying to like hide that and like bury it all because she knows how people react and she's concerned about it, and yet she makes people, like just the court, society in general, like this is gonna get out, people are gonna know that the engagement is off, and for what reason. So like she's done this to this girl. We've got to move on, we've got to stop talking about it. Yeah, I really think this whole plot point was just an excuse to have the main character double down on like her super savior status and just show like how smart she is and how cunning she is and how she can fix any problem that she comes across, because apparently collateral damage is not an issue. Oh, but she does a lot of that, like fixing other people's problems where it shouldn't be like something that she has to deal with, but like she'll just swan in and be like, I'm gonna fix everyone's issues. Oh, there's so much of that. Basically, anytime Alessandra faces an issue or talks to anyone, like, she's always given this golden opportunity to just outshine and outsmart everyone. There are very basic things like knowing not to go with the flow, like with her outfit and how she behaves when she first comes to meet the king, and like knowing to ignore him and like not go up to speak to him, like to get his attention and to get him to come over to her and make the first move. Like, that makes sense in the context of this story and who she is as a character, because we're told from like basically kind of page 1 that she knows how to manipulate men, she knows how to get her way with them, like she knows how that works, that's one of her skills as a character. And so it makes sense when she does something like that and she manages to like get the king's attention where like nobody else could before. It's still slightly unrealistic that nobody else tried anything like that before, but she's meant to be charismatic and manipulative, and it's established very early on that she knows how to get her way with men, so that to me makes perfect sense. And so like things like that I don't have a problem with. Where I have a problem with it is when she seems to just have knowledge or skills that like that one don't make sense for her to have. Like, she would never come across the knowledge to like be able to make the sort of like statements and decisions that she's making to fix these issues, or in fact she's surrounded by people who should know how to do these things, and yet she is the only one who somehow knows how to do them, despite there being canonical reasons for her to not know how to do these things. All because we can't have anyone else like give the correct answer, like she has to give it. We can't imply that maybe somebody got to the right answer before her, or that maybe she didn't know it. Like, she has to say the right thing every time. Like, everything that works, every like decision, every discovery, every like plot, every ploy, all of it has to come from Alessandra, because if somebody else gives it, you might think that that character is somehow smarter or better than the main character, and we can't have that. I realise I'm being really sarcastic, but like, I'm gonna give a couple examples and they get worse every time. The first one is, there's this boxing scene, or it's like a fight scene. Basically somebody takes her out to like a little fighting ring type thing. They're making bets on who they think will win, and obviously there's the very obvious like bigger, stronger than the other opponent kind of person, and like everyone else there is gonna bet on the big guy, right? But the main character, and only the main character, notices that he's got like wounded ribs. She can tell by the way that like he's moving that he must have like bruised or broken ribs, and so she makes a bet on the little guy to win because she can tell that the big guy is injured and like isn't gonna be able to fight as well. But the thing is, like, there's no reason that she would be able to notice this. Like, she might be able to notice that, I don't know, he looks like he's moving strange or like standing strange, but the thing is, what in her experience or her knowledge would lead her to understand that that meant like broken ribs? Like, she doesn't have all this like combat experience, and she's never been to like watch fights before, so where would she have got this information from? Like, where would she be able to make this deduction from? Like, she does not have any established knowledge about fighting or about combat or like physical injuries or how like they manifest their symptoms, but she notices. And yet no one else, none of the like long-term, like long-standing patrons at this place, like this fighting ring, none of them notice. And her companion, who has had like combat training and like knows how to like wield a sword and things, they don't notice. Nobody notices. None of the people who are like common in this environment, who like see this sort of stuff all the time and make bets and like wager their own money on these fights, none of these people who have like a constant stake in these things, who are here all the time, none of them notice. And the person who's with her that like would notice, that like brought her here, he doesn't notice, but she notices, and everybody else is wrong and she's right and she wins the bet. And it's just like, did we really have to have that? Did we really have to have that? It's like every single scene she has to prove like how cool and knowledgeable and discerning she is, and how she can like evaluate any situation so much better than everyone else, and how she sees things that like nobody else does, nobody else notices or picks up on, because she's just so much more perceptive and intuitive than everybody else around her. And it happens all the time and it annoys me. It doesn't end there though, because she'll also have like these expert like subterfuge skills, and I know she's like deceptive, but that tends to be on like a personal level. She should not necessarily be able to outsmart like the kingdom's like smartest advisors, or like this bandit that's been outwitting all of these advisors. Like, she shouldn't be able to outsmart any of these characters, because why would she? Why is that a thing that she can do? You could say that she's been thinking about the position of being queen and has like been like training herself to be queen, but not her whole life. And also, where is she getting the resources to do so? Because she can only really access books and history. It's not like she'll have somebody like the king who's been actively taught like since birth how to like rule and how to deal with these sort of issues, or in fact the advisors who are clearly qualified for their positions. It's literally their job to know how to do these things, and they have been like helping to run a kingdom for a long time, and yet neither the king nor his advisors or anybody else seems to have any idea how to deal with a lot of issues. And the main character, who has no reason knowing any of these things, just comes in and is like, well, why don't you just do this? And it's like the first thing out of her mouth, and everyone's just like silent and like, oh, I guess we're gonna do that then. So, to be specific, the situation I'm talking about is basically the kingdom is being like plagued by this like one specific bandit, and lots of like shipments and various things are being like stolen, and they're like untraceable. And it's gonna sound stupid, but the way that, like, what they realize is happening is that this bandit is not like keeping things for themselves. They're clearly giving it to like the poor and to the merchants, and it's very clear that nobody's going to rat them out, because why would you rat out literal Robin Hood? So the issue is like the king can't figure out how to catch this one bandit, and like none of the guards have managed to catch like this one guy, and none of the peasants or like the merchants or anything will give up this guy. But even like his advisors, Like, there's like 5 of them, and they've been running the kingdom for a while. And bearing in mind he's been like conquering other kingdoms this whole time, like none of them can figure out how to catch this one bandit guy. And so Alessandra swans into the room and like says like it's the first time she's ever heard of it. And the king basically tells her like, oh yeah, there's a bandit and he's like stealing my stuff. Oh my god, where is it? I will find it. So yeah, the king basically says that we've tried staging attacks to catch him to no avail. We've issued a reward for his capture, but not as though he's tempted by it. This man is making me look a fool. The council members are silent, and then Alessandra, perfect being that she is, says, Your Majesty, I have an idea for dealing with the bandit, if you'd care to hear it. Since you were so appreciative of my advice in dealing with the rebels in Pegai, which I will come back to, because why would she know how to deal with rebels in Pegai? I hope you will trust me enough to let me speak on this matter as well. So she goes on to speak, and she says, If attempts to trap the bandit have proved unsuccessful, then perhaps a trap for those whom he's giving his stolen goods to. That should be for those to whom he's giving his stolen goods. I'm very sorry. That threw me, because the sentence order is bad. I'm not here to focus on that. Yeah, but then she goes on to say, that would help you find the right individuals to question and learn the thief's identity. So what she proposes is melt down some coins, create a new seal to stamp them with, something that varies only slightly from the current seal. When the money is stolen and used to purchase things in the market, you can arrest whoever is found carrying them. The room goes silent. And obviously Callias the Shadow King says, it's the best idea to ever come out of this room. And nobody has any objections, and so that's the plan. And I don't understand. She had seconds to come up with that idea. She knew that immediately, like it was just a common thing that she would know. She didn't even have to think about it. There wasn't even a conversation. She was told the issue, and the very next thing she said was, here's how you can do this. And nobody, like, it was the perfect plan. Of course it was, because the author made her say the perfect plan that nobody else could have possibly thought of, which is just like, how did they not think of it? Or more accurately, how would Alessandra think of it? Just like, how would she know how to do these things? But also, oh my god, here's the thing, right? It is revealed that the bandit figure, who is obviously a literal Robin Hood type, like, he steals from the rich nobles and he gives things to the poor. It's Orin, who is the noble who's always talking about the poor and helping the poor. Or like, how he bought blankets for all of the kids in the orphanage. He is a literal saint, who's like, maybe a little bit pious, but he is very clearly using like his wealth and his position of power to like make things better for the kingdom's like poorest. Like, he's not employing people, like he himself has been putting himself at risk and like going out and like stealing things and like performing these heists and giving to like the least well off. And like, I'm sorry, am I supposed to feel good about him getting like captured and sent to jail and getting his like comeuppance? Because they very clearly want to capture him, and Alessandra works out by accident, by being in his rooms, she works out who the bandit is, and she like reveals his identity, and he's like thrown in jail, and that's the end of it. And it turned out she managed to do that like before the whole coin thing, but it was established that the coin thing was going to work. Ridiculous. But just like, why are we supporting that again? Because like, he was out there doing like charity things and giving blankets to literal orphans in an orphanage and like stealing from the rich to give to the poor and the needy. And yet, oh, how are you going to swing it that Robin Hood is the bad guy? His character is really weird to me because like, he's meant to be annoying because he's always talking about like these like charity things or whatever, or like the poor, and going on and on and on about it, and like kind of get it, but also like he's in a room full of nobles and like he's talking about like the poor and the downtrodden, so like it's clear that he's trying to like get other people like on board with maybe helping the poor. And like, he does romantically pursue the main character a little bit, but the minute she like says that she's not interested, he backs off like completely, like way off, and he's reluctant to even speak to her again because he's like, no, I understand, you made your decision. He leaves her alone. He's an actual good man who respects the decision that she made, unlike a lot of the other men in the story that don't stop pursuing her, that she doesn't have an issue with. You know, he's like actually doing the actual good, acceptable, right thing by just backing off and being like, okay, yeah, I respect your decision, cool, I'm gonna like go over here now and that's thank you, bye, you know. And he's helping like literal orphans, giving actual blankets to freezing orphans. He is the nicest character in this book. I literally have no idea how the author tried to flip this and make it so the readers wouldn't root for actual freaking Robin Hood. And like, what are the wealthy even using the wealth for in this book? The main character has like a dozen dresses, and there's like parties and balls and events and plays and everything, and there are like jewels and like amazing food, and like at one point she redecorates like the entire throne room for like one party. And the king is gifting Alessandra like jewels and hairpins and brooches and so much finery, and all he's doing with like his own personal wealth and like the kingdom's wealth is just waging war on like the surrounding kingdoms because like he wants to be like the world ruler or whatever. So like, I really do not know why we are supposed to support the main character in this plan to like take down freaking Robin Hood, because now the situation in this kingdom is the poor will like continue to like starve and be cold and have issues and not have enough money, and like no one is looking out for them. Like, the main character as like the potential like future ruler of this kingdom, she has zero care for the poor or like saving these orphans. Like at one point she even says that she finds it really, really boring. There's literally a point in this book where Orin, like the Robin Hood type guy, is talking about like giving blankets to these Nexosian orphans, and Alessandra is like, she just cuts him off mid-sentence and is like, excuse me, and leaves. And the next sentence says something like, can't believe he's talking about like charity and orphans and like helping the poor, and how dare like such good looks be wasted on a man like him. And I'm like, sorry, you're supposed to be the future ruler of this place according to you. Like, am I supposed to think that she'd be a good queen? Am I supposed to be rooting for her? This kind of brings me on to like a small point, but one which I feel like for a book that's trying like so hard to be woke, is kind of somehow like really weirdly tone deaf. So the Shadow King has been conquering like the neighbouring kingdoms, and he has done 7 so far. So in total he has 7 kingdoms. Like I guess he's conquered 6, and then 7 includes like the kingdom that he's already king of. One of these kingdoms, which is Pagai, is rebelling. Obviously because they don't want to be like overthrown and occupied by an invading force. I don't think I have to explain that one. Callias then needs some way to subdue them. Note there is no interest in like winning them over or like, you know, bettering the lives of the people of like this new kingdom that he would now be the ruler of. The whole conversation is about like how to beat these rebels down and get them to submit. And it's very hard to root for a character if you're basically telling me that this guy, like, this is the type of ruler that he will be / already is. And the main character has no problem with it. She's exactly the same. It's like, over their meal, like, they just lightheartedly discuss, like, public hangings and hearings and floggings and beatings and things. And I'm like, sorry? I need to find some quotes. I know I do. The purple tab is my colonizer tab, so that should be fun. Yeah, so the king has recently conquered Pagai. And just to, like, put it out there, like, why he's doing this, it's not for, like, any specific reason. The king says, I have an empire to build. And that's like his only reasoning. Like he just wants to take over these countries for the sake of taking over countries and being like the big powerful world ruler with his shadow powers. Great. Yeah, so some delegates arrive from Pagai, and he says that there are open acts of rebellion happening right and left. The people kill my soldiers, start fires in the barracks, throw rotten food upon my regent when she travels the streets. Alessa says, they oppose your rule, and then it says, a muscle ticks in his jaw. They were beaten. I conquered them fair and square. Their taxes are hardly more than what they were before, and my soldiers provide protection for the whole city. The only lawlessness to be found is within the insurgent peasants. And Alessandra, the main character, says, so what's to be done? Public hangings? Or please take it one step at a time. And the king says, so far it's only been public floggings. The smaller the population, the fewer taxes I receive. Not like he needs them. He's literally handing out jewellery and parties left and right, but fine. He then says, I plan to move on to conquering Estetia by next year. The army needs the money. If you weren't conquering places, you maybe wouldn't need to fund an army. The main character's response is, I find it fascinating. Doesn't flogging a man make it difficult for him to work? How will you obtain your taxes then? I swear to God, why am I supposed to root for this girl? He says, do you have a better idea? And she says, oftentimes, it's not fear of punishment that prevents wrongdoing. Sometimes working for something to gain is better. What do the Pagians want aside from their independence? Because nobody's going to give them that, apparently. Bearing in mind, like, this isn't a medieval society. Like, they literally have electricity and light bulbs and, like, indoor lighting and plumbing and stuff, so, like, okay. So, Alessandra says, give them a voice, allow them to select someone of their own choosing to be on the regent's council, if the attacks cease. So, if you stop attacking us, we'll give you some more power. And the king even says, wouldn't that give them more power? And she says, no, I'd give them the illusion of power. Once you know who they've chosen and who that person interacts with, you'll find the ringleaders, and you can put an end to all of them, crush the entire rebellion underfoot. So just to clarify, what Alessa is proposing is give the people a vote, like a democratic opinion, and once the people have made that opinion, they've voted, you're going to round up those people that they voted for and like ship them off. Gone. So they're not actually going to get any more power for this. They're basically just tricking them into like exposing who these appointed people would be talking to are most likely to be these like leaders of this like rebel insurgent force, which I guess, but also, I don't know, like, I feel like if you've got, like, electricity, maybe the neighbouring country just doesn't want to be invaded, and maybe you should just not do that. It's not like it's medieval warfare, is it? And there is a line later on that suggests that the Shadow King is planning to invade more kingdoms, because, like, why wouldn't he? And then it all culminates with him saying, this is like half a book later, the people of Pagai cast their votes for representation on the council. The newly appointed voice of the people is being followed discreetly everywhere he goes. We'll know all the ringleaders of the revolt soon enough. As for the bandit, blah blah blah. I think the last, or one of the last things we hear about the rebels is, she's like walking around like twirling her skirts and having fun, and Callias the Shadow King comes up and he's like, I'm also in an excellent mood. We've rounded up all the Pagian revolutionaries. They're to be put to death first thing tomorrow morning. And we've found several peasants carrying the bandit's stolen money. One of them is ready to talk. Then Alessandra like laughs and like reveals who she knows the bandit to be, but like she's in such a good mood. She's just heard that like this whole thing about giving these invaded people like a fake political leader has paid off in the fact that the people who were rebelling are now going to be killed so that her stupid Shadow King boyfriend can continue to rule over them even when they don't want him to, because he invaded their country. Yeah, and then Orin, the Robin Hood guy, gets sentenced to life in prison. He's been stripped of all his lands and titles. He won't trouble us anymore, and it's like, he barely was, he was just helping the poor. Oh my god. It says we've located most of the gold coins he took and redistributed. All the peasants caught with him have also been imprisoned. They knew very well they were being given stolen goods. Yeah, I'm sure they did, but like, they're literal peasants. I guess they don't have very much. Like, if you were starving, or like an orphan who didn't have like a fucking blanket, it doesn't matter if it's stolen. If you're like the downtrodden, like, you're gonna take stolen gold, because you need it, because you're clearly not getting enough anywhere, because the rich are just like eating chocolates and throwing ball after ball every week. Oh my god, it's so tone deaf. And I just have to wonder, because like, these foreign peasants, they're never like humanized or characterized beyond just being like this external force for plot. It's like there's no nuance. There's never any thought to them as like people or like individuals or anything like that. It's like a strategy board game. And like the king, even though he's conquered like this other like kingdom, this other country, it's very clear that like, because generally like if you do conquer a country and like you say, oh yeah, I'm your ruler now, it's like, okay, well those are your people now. But it's very, very clear that he does not consider them like his people to like protect and look after. He just very clearly intends to rule over them, and still just think of them as like foreign peasants who are just not his problem beyond their insurrection. It's really clear from the context given that this guy is just like colonizing the surrounding area. It's all for his own gain. It doesn't have anything to do with like generic fantasy plots of like, oh, we want to unite the land or bring the people together or like make like a stronger bond between kingdoms or like just some crap like that, you know. It's not about that. It would take 2 seconds to shoehorn in some sort of like, oh, we're doing this for this greater good reason by like this reason that's been set up in like the past. It's like there isn't a reason given. There is no like we're trying to unite people or overthrow, you know, another ruler who's like maybe really evil and cruel, we're trying to like free his subjects or something. It's not that. It's just he wants to rule, he wants more land to rule, and so he's going to do that, even if it means rounding up and killing all the peasants that don't want to be ruled over by somebody new because they were quite happy in their country being pagans, and now they have to be Naxosians because he took over. So like once again, I ask, why am I rooting for these people? Why would I want to support like some king just like colonizing a bunch of like foreign kingdoms and like invading and taking over and just being like, yeah, we're going to implement our laws now, and like, because they definitely do have like a different culture, like they're meant to wear like certain different clothing, and it's only ever referenced in the clothing literally because the main character like takes their clothing style and puts it into her own, and it's such a shock to like the ladies of the court who couldn't figure out how to integrate the Pegian clothing style like in the months beforehand. Like they're just not able to figure it out because they weren't smart enough like the main character. So like it's clear that like these Pegians have like their own like culture, they have like their own like, it's that they're just doing their own little thing. We don't learn anything about them, literally. We're just told that they wear pants and loose shirts. Like, okay. Great, thank you. But like, why would I want to support a king who just like invades and like beats down the peasants? Like, just what the hell? I'm so confused. I'm so confused. I have no idea why the Shadow King is meant to be the love interest. I really don't. And like the main character is just as bad. Like this is all fun and games to them. It's so tone deaf against like the constant like feminine preaching about like modern like feminism and everything. But like looking at that next to like their hate for the guy who helps orphans and the girl with the arranged marriage, I don't know, it's just all starting to look a little bit sketch for me. Like I'm supposed to be glad that the king doesn't get assassinated and that like the bad guys and like the plot like are discovered. Like okay, yeah, I get it. But I don't know, I feel like if the advisor had like succeeded him and so the king wouldn't have been like invading all these places and like making his kingdom bigger just for the sake of it, I don't know, I feel like his shitty reign would be over. And then like the main character wouldn't become the queen because she clearly doesn't deserve it either. Actually, there's a twist-ish at the end of this where like the king's older brother, who he thought was dead, it turns out that like their father, the king, the previous king, had tried to have his older brother murdered because he didn't have like these shadow powers. He like framed it as an assassination, but his brother survived and then teamed up with like one of the people on like the council, like one of the advisors, and has been plotting to assassinate the Shadow King and then like come back and like reclaim his throne as technically the rightful heir. And I just feel like this book has the whole plot backwards. Like, would it not make more sense to have a book about an eldest child who is disowned by their father, the king, forced to sort of like give up their place as like the next in line for the throne because they weren't born with like these magical shadow powers, but their younger sibling was, and so their father like beat them and like hired an assassin to like fake their death in a way that made it look like an accident or assassination or something like that. But he survives the assassination, teams up with like, you know, a member of the council, comes back years later under a disguise, and the disguise being he's just changed his name and dyed his hair, and the main character doesn't recognise his own brother, and neither does anybody else in the kingdom recognise their like former prince, but okay. But he comes back like to strike like this evil invading king with the shadow powers down and like reclaim his rightful seat as the heir to the throne. Does that not sound like a more like, that makes more sense to me? That sounds like a better story to me. I don't just want to read about like the girl who hates orphans and the guy that likes invading places deciding that they're gonna keep doing those things. I don't want to read about that. Like, if anything, the sneaky advisor, Lord Vasco or whatever it is, it's like he could have turned out to be wanting to do this to like stop the king invading all of these places and like wasting all like the kingdom's resources on sending the army in to like invade these places that clearly don't want to be invaded and like stop this evil king's rule and put back on the throne the child who should have been heir to the throne. Like, it makes sense, right? Especially when like the country's poor are relying on literal Robin Hood to survive. Like, what the fuck? Why was that not the plot? Why am I reading about literal villains? Like, what is this? I can't. I actually can't. It's just, there's so much wrong with this book. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you can overlook these things and just focus on the very bland romance between the two main characters, fair enough. Enjoy. Enjoy your weird meal of like, you know, let's not steal from the rich and give to the poor. Let's let the poor starve. And also let's invade all these other kingdoms and like kill off all like the rebel insurgents because they didn't want to be invaded. And the bad guy, like the real secret bad guy, is actually your older brother who was almost killed because his father didn't want him because he didn't have magical powers, and that's why he can't be the king. That's why you have the throne. What actually? It's so bad, it's so bad. There are so many issues in this book. It's just, I kept finding them. It was like a domino effect. Like, once I started focusing on like the feminism issue and like why that didn't really work, then I started thinking about like, actually, There's some like weird grey politics going on in this book that I'm also not really vibing with. And like, I know it's a fantasy and like I know it's a fiction and like I get it, but also it is just really tone deaf. Like, you're supposed to generally have like morals and things, and if your only moral is just, well, women should be allowed to sleep with whoever they want, yes, but that isn't the only moral available. Like, you can pick more than one. Oh, and like one more thing about Alessandra, which I kind of mentioned before, is that first lover that she murdered. Again, I think the book is trying to paint it as though like that murder is justified, but what happens is she's been seeing this guy, and one day he just takes her out somewhere and basically says that he doesn't want to be with her anymore. You know, he's not really into her, he's kind of like interested in being with someone else. And in a fit of rage, she freaks out and stabs him and murders him, and then takes his body and puts it in a trunk and drags it out to the forest and buries it in a hole. The thing is, I know some stories like to do the whole like gender flipped scenario thing, but I feel like this makes me just like slightly uncomfortable no matter which way you try and do it. If it was a girl telling a guy that she didn't want to be with him, and the guy flips out and gets angry, murders her, hides her body, like dumps it in a hole in the forest, like that is a thing that happens a lot in the real world to real women. And I know the book tries to like play this guy off as being like a bit of a douchebag or whatever, but like, I don't think anything that he did was deserving of being murdered for not wanting to be in a relationship with the main character. And I don't know, like, that's literally like page 1, and I don't know how after that point I'm still supposed to like support the main character. I just feel like just because it's a woman doing the murdering this time, it doesn't really make it any better, like from my perspective. She says, they've never found the body of the first and only boy who broke my heart, and they never will. I buried Hector Galanis in a hole so deep even the devils of the earth couldn't reach him. So he tells her it had been fun, but it was done. Some other girl had caught his fancy. At the time, all Alessandra could think of was the fact that she'd given everything to Hector, like her first kiss, and like she slept with him. And she tells him that she loves him, and he says thanks, but I think it's time we moved on. She goes on to say, he had other things to say too. When I sank my knife into his chest, words came spilling out of him almost as fast as the blood. And the last thing Hector says before he dies is Alessandra. He says her name. And Alessandra's only thought is, his last word was my name. His last thought was of me. I won. I'm okay with making like a villain, an evil person, like the center of a story and making them the protagonist. The issue is, this book sets us up with that. That is the intro to this book. Page 1. The first chapter. This book sets us up with a character who, when she's rejected, she murders the person who rejected her and feels like she's won that situation because the last thing they said before they died was about her name. Like, she feels validated. And no. Just literally just imagine if the genders were swapped. Like, literally just imagine if it was a male character saying that about like a female love interest. I can't. And like, this is supposedly, following on from this is like all the feminist like soapboxing. After this is the introduction we get to this character. And like, as I said, I'm fine reading about like morally grey characters or villains. I actually really like that. I read a lot of grimdark, if you can't tell. So like, before anybody comes into the comments saying things like, well, you know, the main character doesn't have to be like all goody or whatever, like she can be evil. Yes, she can, but like, the narrative of the book has to reflect that like that's the kind of character we're reading about, and it doesn't. There has to be something like contextually within the book that lets you know that you are reading about like an evil character, a morally grey character, like someone who is, at least in my opinion, completely and utterly reprehensible and awful and horrible. Like, this is the kind of character who would full on be like some sort of villain or antagonist in another story. Like, that's fine. But the book does not read as though you're reading this from the perspective of a villain. The only hint you get that this book is even remotely self-aware of that fact is the like foreword, like the author's like dedication, is it mentions a Slytherin romance. The things that she does, like other characters in the book, don't comment on it. Everybody likes her, everybody agrees with her. Like, the book and the way that the events play out constantly reinforce that this character is right and that she is in the right. Even when like a literal like constable or like some member of the law or whatever comes to the palace and exposes the fact that they're pretty sure that she killed this boy because they found his body in a chest with her goddamn initials on it. So I don't know why she's meant to be smart, like, when this is where we're starting off. Seriously, why would you bury somebody in a chest with your own name on it, but whatever? And the king just laughs about it. He laughs it off. He says that like he didn't even care. Literally, she just got away with murder. And I don't mean that in like a fun way. Like, there are definitely books where the protagonist does murder an antagonist and it is like deserved, but they could still face repercussions for it. In this case, it just wasn't deserved. Like, she did just murder a completely innocent guy. They just have a laugh about it, and it's never spoken of again. Because, like, the whole thing is, this guy's father is trying to, like, get justice for his dead, murdered son, who's been missing for years, and now they finally found his body, and he wants some closure, and, like, he doesn't get anything, and the main character and the king literally just laugh about it. Oh, it's so weird. The thing is, if you'd set this up to be like an evil romance between two villains, you could have made it so much darker and more like gothic, and you could have made it like them doing like whatever they want. They can have like their horrible conquest of other kingdoms, and they can have their, you know, cackling and joking about like murdering people. It's like, if you want to do that, do it, but don't do it in a way that makes me think that you're completely unaware of doing it and that you don't see anything wrong with it. You're just like, oh yeah, it's just like a fictional fantasy land, whatever, haha, murder is fun. It's like, is it? Because like, if she can just kill someone like for the laugh of it, then like why are the other characters that are also doing things like, you know, attempting to murder someone getting like serious repercussions? They're being like put to death or whatever. At one point in this book, the king puts a bunch of his own guards to death because they were distracted and didn't manage to like stop this bandit. And the reason they were distracted is because Alessandra was like naked, and obviously no man can keep his eyes off her, so her being naked meant that this bandit got away because the guards were distracted. And the king's just like, yeah, I'm gonna put them all to death for failing in their duty. But yet Alessandra, who literally murdered someone, like full on broke the law, murdered someone, just gets to like chill and laugh about it, and they're like, oh yeah, that's so fun, can't believe you murdered someone, how fun. Oh, I'm gonna lose my mind. I just feel like this book has no self-awareness, there's no nuance, it does not know what it's doing. It's like it wants to write a romance about good people, but somehow makes them like some of the worst and just like most unlikable characters I've ever found in books. But yet all the characters in this universe like them and praise them and want to be like them and think they're in the right. And the way that the events in the book play out prove that, you know, this person is in the right. It's like, yay, the protagonist won. But it's at the same time I'm like, but weirdly the protagonist is sort of like the villain of this book when you think about it. But the book doesn't seem to realise that. So I feel like if you were to rewrite this, you could either go the route of the villains in this story should be the protagonists, and the protagonists should really be like the antagonists. Or you keep the protagonists being like the same people, like Calais and Alessandra, but make it like an actual full-on like evil villain story, just like lean fully into it. It just kind of baffles my mind that like, surely the author had to realise. But yeah, this is the end result, so I can only assume that they just did not, like they just couldn't grasp their own implications of like what they were implying in their own book. It's just weird to me. It's like the rules don't apply to your main character. They apply to everybody else, but not the main character. She's allowed to do like the most awful things and say the awful things. But yeah, it's almost like the book will tell us something about her. The book will say like, oh yeah, you know, this person is a feminist. Or it will present her in a way that's meant to think like, yeah, she's technically a good person because she's not mean. She's not technically evil. She doesn't behave that way. But the actions that she does sort of reflect that she is an awful person. So it's very weird. It doesn't mesh. There's like this weird tonal like, oh, I don't like it. And I can't tell which one it's trying to do. I can't tell whether it's trying to make her a likeable good character and it's just failing spectacularly because somehow the author doesn't know that like hating orphans and invading people and murdering people that aren't in love with you are somehow not good things. Or it was meant to be a story about like the antagonists or like the villains, but completely failed in every regard to actually like show that on the page or make it known, and somehow everyone loving them just seems to like cancel all that out. I really don't know which was the intention, but it fails on both counts. It's somewhere in this like weird nebulous middle space where it isn't really anything and it doesn't really work no matter what category you put it into. I just feel like the sheer amount of ignorance you'd need to read this book and not pick up on at least like a couple of these issues is just staggering. And like, as I say, I don't have a particular problem with this book. I'm not how you're saying like it's like actually harmful and problematic. That's not the point. I'm saying that this book, within the context of its own story, does not make sense. Tonally and thematically, and like whatever the intentions of this book were, it does not work and it does not make sense. And like I said, I don't think any of these issues were purposeful. I don't think the author is there thinking like, oh yeah, I intend to write a story that reinforces that, you know, you should not steal from the rich, you should allow the poor to suffer, you shouldn't, like, you should be bored by like charity and orphans and donations and things. And the people who like try to change that should be punished. And that you should hate girls for no reason. And that rich powerful people invading other countries for absolutely no reason and then like really doubling down on the punishment of those countries when they kind of rebel against it, that's also okay too. You can talk about that over tea and biscuits and have a laugh about it. Like all these things are presented as like, this is like the okay. The protagonist is doing it and is rewarded for doing it, and these things have like good consequences. So that's presented as like the good action. And all the characters that go against this, like literal Robin Hood, once again, are somehow the bad people. And I don't think it was the intention to present it that way, but that is the way it is presented. I've said tone deaf 1,000 times in this video, but that's just what it is. And I've never read anything else by Tricia Levenseller, and at this point I really don't intend to, but if any of you have, I'd be really interested to know, are there like similar issues and inconsistencies in her other books, if she has written anything else? I don't know, it just seems sus. I regret reading this, I really do. It's one of those where it's funny when I look at it now, I'm like, how can it be this bad? So there it is. I need to stop talking, I really need to, because this is gonna be so long, right? I've definitely been ranting for like at least an hour. So I'm gonna go, but like, I hope you appreciated that these are all the reasons why I really don't like this book, and why I really think that the book is bad, and these are all like the issues that I had with it, and this is why I don't think you should read this book. The weirdest thing is, like, I can tell it's not purposeful. I can tell it's just that the author just like didn't think about it, like she just doesn't get it, like just never considered it, and nobody who read it, I guess because you've got beta readers, nobody read it and thought like, this is a bit weird, isn't it? Like, did nobody think that? Anyway, thank you for listening to me rant. I know it's been a while. If you made it this far, wow, congratulations. I'm going to go, so thank you guys for watching. Maybe I will see you in the next video, which will hopefully not be like an hour-long rant. Normally I talk about like good fantasy books, but there have to be exceptions sometimes. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye!